Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today and for attending a TalentClick session on how to use attitudes, values, and personality insight to reduce turnover by 20%. I'm Natalie, and I will be facilitating today's session, so it's my pleasure to be speaking with you all today. The length of this will be about 30 minutes, and there will be time at the end of the session for any questions, so please feel free to ask questions throughout the session, and you can do so by typing into the question panel, and I will do my best to address all of your questions at the end of the session. This session will also be recorded, so if you want to hear it again or if you want to distribute it to any of your teammates, you'll definitely be able to do so. We will be sending over copies of this recording within the next 24 hours, so stay tuned for that by email. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm a program director at TalentClick. I've been a trainer and consultant for a number of organizations in construction, transportation, forestry, hospitality, retail, amongst others. To tell you a bit more about TalentClick, at TalentClick, we work with a variety of different industries. So whether it's a lot of those industries that I just named, we actually help them manage risk in their organization. So whether that means making better hiring decisions when it comes to training, developing, and coaching teams, we really do this by helping focus on the individual's fit. And so that's really what we're going to be focusing on through today's session. And really just reducing negative outcomes like turnover, absenteeism, and retention. That's what we'll be focused on. So chances are if you signed up for today's session, you've either had firsthand experience with turnover issues or you've had personal experience with working with a bad hire. So that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about how to manage that and prevent that. So what's on today's agenda? We'll start off by talking about what we mean when we're referring to attitudes, values, and personality and how that's measured. And then we'll get into how do we apply this knowledge? How do we apply this during interviews? And how can we evaluate fit for an entire team using team analytics and benchmarking? So by the end of today's session, my hope is to leave you guys with an understanding on how to use assessments to make better hiring and onboarding decisions. You'll develop the knowledge to assess job and culture fit early on, and you'll also understand how to conduct more powerful interviews so you can improve your onboarding and hiring process. You'll also learn how you can effectively coach, train, and develop individuals based on their own personal attitudes, values, and personality. So how do we measure individual differences? Well, first things first, one thing we know about people is that people differ in many ways, and people's differences translate into their on-the-job performance. So imagine if you could do that before you hire them, so that you had this well-rounded insight on the individual. So I'm about to put a few images on screen here. So, ask yourself what you prefer out of these images. What are some of your interests? What type of environments would you prefer spending most of your time in? How do you respond in different types of situations? What you prefer, what you gravitate towards, what your interests are, and how you like spending most of your time. Your responses to these images, situations, and scenarios say a little something about your attitude, your values, and your personality. These are the types of things you can't necessarily see in an interview. So generally in an interview, you've got really good insight into a person's past experience, their skills, education, what their communication style is like, their overall appearance. You've even got insight into them based on their background checks and their reference checks. But what you can't see is the individual's natural impulses, their urges, their tendencies, what their preferences are, their hardwiring and their default settings, and also their knee-jerk reactions, how they tend to act, behave when no one's watching once they've passed their probationary period. So these are all things that run deep, and those are reflective of our attitudes, values, and personality. So I'd like for you to think about a time where an employee or a coworker quit. Why was that? Think about a time when an employee or coworker just didn't fit well with the team. Why was that? Or think about a role that you were doing a lot of hiring for that for some reason had a lot of turnover. You couldn't make the proper fit decisions for those roles. Or on the other hand, think of a star employee or coworker who was great at their job and they loved what they did. Why was that? What was it about that person? What was it about the role, the responsibilities, and the tasks that really energized them? It's all about fit at the end of the day. And really, that's why more and more organizations are using these types of predictive analytics and this business intelligence to help make these well-informed decisions. Organizations are using this intelligence in a few different ways. First and foremost, it's a great way to identify higher risk applicants early on at the hiring stage. Secondly, it's a good way to identify people who would have otherwise been excluded from the interview process. Interviewing is a skill that some of us have, and some of us merely don't have that skill, and that's okay. Being great at interviews doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't be a rock star within a given role. So this can also be used as a tool to sift people in who might have otherwise been disqualified from the hiring process. It's also a great way to reallocate job duties or reassign roles as well. So really getting an understanding as to, okay, well, sometimes things might not be working as effectively within a given role, but what if we could take this great employee and place them in a different area in our organization so that they are working within tasks and an area that is more in alignment with their values, their natural strengths, and their personality. You can also use this to identify training needs in your existing workforce as well, and to understand and spot different patterns on your team. So, what is it about this team that's working great? What are some of the common attributes that we see within this team? And what are some of the attributes that a given team or department is lacking? And how can we help fill those gaps with our hiring practices and also with our training and development? So let's get into how we can use this for hiring the right fit. So how the process works is a lot of you who have gone through the process yourself, you'll see that it's as easy as clicking on a link and doing a questionnaire that takes about 10 to 15 minutes to do. And once the individual goes through the questionnaire, you've got insight into a candidate. You got insight into their work style, their attitudes, their values, and this is really what you can use to help make those well-informed decisions on a candidate that are key predictors for someone's future behaviors on the job. From doing that one survey, you've actually got 4 key pieces of information on a candidate. So the first piece is you get insight into the individual's work style and their personality. So what do they naturally tend to gravitate towards with regards to tasks, environment, and culture? What would they be the ideal fit for? That's your work style and performance profile. Secondly, you've got insight into someone's safety personality as well. So if you're working in an industrial setting where you've got certain roles that do have a safety sensitive focus, this is your key area that you might want to focus on. In this section of the tool, we focus on 6 key personality areas that are strongly linked to incident causation. So whether it's things like measuring rule resistance, impatience, distractibility, this would be your guide there. We've also got a specific tool to assess driver and operator risk. So anyone who operates heavy machinery or drives or operates a vehicle as a primary focus of their occupation, this would be your tool for that. Then last but not least, we've got the work values and attitudes assessment, which help you assess an individual's role within a given organization. So would this employee or individual be the right fit for our organizations and our team's culture? So this is what our one assessment engine can actually generate all these pieces of information on an individual. So things you want to ask yourself when you're considering fit for your role is, what does it take beyond skills and experience to excel in this role? So what attitudes, values, and personality traits would help set this person up for success? And when we're talking to hiring managers, one thing that we see a lot is that, over 80% of the time when it doesn't work with a given employee, it doesn't really have anything to do with the fact that they didn't have the right training or the right experience. Often when it doesn't work out with a candidate, and I'm going to preface, it's over 80% of the time, it has to do with the individual just didn't have the right fit, attitude, and traits for the team, the organization, and the responsibilities required. And so that's why we have a measure in place here to help map different positions and the organization to the work style areas that we measure within these tools. So the AVP bundle actually provides you with a summary and in-depth details on a candidate and their fit within a given role. So for each individual, you're actually provided with a summary on their positive aspects. So what are the positive aspects of the results? What are this person's strengths? You're given coaching considerations, and you're given insight into what is the ideal work environment and team that this person would be ideal for. You're also given tips on how you can effectively coach, train, and develop this person. So there's also within that, there's a personalized interview question section within each report, which gives you a guide for your interview so that you actually have the ability to ask pointed questions to help you further explore fit within a given role. And this is really helpful, especially when you've got benchmarks or what we call these ideal score ranges. So as you'll see on this report, the orange section on each of the dimension lines are reflective of the ideal score range. And so on this report, for instance, you can see that this individual fell outside of range on 3 different areas. So here there's the reactive, direct, and spontaneous area. And so as you can see here, there's no reason to say exclude this candidate. What you can do here is, say if you had a great phone screening process with this individual and you want to maybe understand these potential concern areas a little better, you've actually got specific interview questions in the reports that help you further probe into fit and understand this person on another level. So you get insight into, okay, how is this person answering these potential concern areas? You're using the recommended interview questions to explore fit for the role and to see, okay, is this person, what's their self-awareness like in these given areas? And the candidate's response may very well give you the reassurance or the insight you need to make well-informed decisions around fit for the role, the team, and the culture, of course. So in addition to the benchmarking, you've also got insights into to consider which roles the individual would be the ideal fit for. So if there's particular roles that you frequently do a lot of hiring for, you can assess, okay, out of the roles that we have or the placements that we're making right now, which role would this individual be the right fit for? So you can also list different job categories to understand, okay, out of these common roles that we hire for, what would be the ideal fit for this candidate? Next thing you want to do is you definitely want to consider how an employee would fit within your team, the environment, and also the culture in your organization. So here, you might spot some trends in an organization, but what we want to be mindful of is how do we fill in the gaps that our teams might have as well. So it's important to have a well-balanced team where your employees can actually complement each other's areas for development. That's really what encourages growth, collaboration, and learning amongst your team. So in this case here, although there's trends in certain areas, as you can see it's circled here, you can see how maybe having a team that's highly spontaneous might be lacking in certain focused procedures, having processes in place. So having a few regimented people in the mix here would definitely help complement some of the potential gaps that this team might have. Also having, for instance, a lot of reactive folks on a team might mean that everyone's got a good, strong sense of urgency and they're reactive to different priorities and tasks that get thrown at them. However, you might want a few calm people in the mix as well to help balance each other out. So the calm people can in fact be a good balancing force for the more reactive folks. It's also important to consider what sets apart the top performers from the lower performers on a team. So although it's great to have the information on what generally a top performer might look like, this is great for in the hiring phase, but it's also good to understand okay, what are some of the potential risks to consider as well and to be wary of? So not only does this help you hire more ideal fit candidates, but it also helps you reduce risk in the workplace from an incident standpoint, specifically when it comes to safety. So not only can you help alleviate issues around theft, fraud, but in a safety sensitive environment, this could also be incremental for reducing risk around injuries, equipment damage, property damage, and first aid incidents too. It's also a great mitigator for potential management challenges, specifically for employees who might be working in more remote and isolated areas. Here's a quick look at some of our recent case studies, which have demonstrated the link between attitudes, values, and personality, and how this information was actually used in the hiring process to help decrease turnover. And here, this is a recent study we did in the insurance industry. As you can see here, we helped them reduce turnover by 20%. Here's another instance with a construction company where we helped increase retention, reduce turnover, and the screening time it took to identify high quality candidates. So as you can see, the savings here were huge. So having more insight on a candidate really is a great way to increase retention, tenure, and turnover overall. And so if you have this insight early on, you can really be proactive about the level of risk and considerations that you're taking when you're looking to make a hiring decision. So a lot of the times we have great tools in place to help us assess, okay, does this person have the right skills? Do they have the right education? You'll often do your reference checks, your background checks, your phone screening. These are all great pieces of information, and we say carry on doing that. Those are great tools to be using. However, focusing on those pieces of information alone is kind of like driving and only looking into the rearview mirror. You're only looking at someone's past behaviors. Tools that help evaluate values, personality, and attitudes, these are good reflectors of someone's future behavior on the job. So what are they going to be like when they're not necessarily supervised, once they've passed a probationary period, and so forth. So to summarize some of the key aspects we've covered today, attitudes, values, personality, huge contributor to fit and job success. These are important factors to help predict, and they're in fact measurable as well, and they can help predict someone's success in a given role. And they're a great tool to help you ask questions during an interview to help understand fit a little better for different roles, different teams, and different managers that the individual might be working alongside. This is great because it helps you make your job search more effective, and so that you can have fewer headaches, and so that you can spend time doing something that you enjoy doing, and so that you could have higher job satisfaction at the end of the day. What better way to help support high-performing teams than by providing them with other high performers? So thank you all for your time today and for attending this session. I hope you learned something new and exciting. And now I'd love to turn things over for the question and answer session of today. I'm just going to have a look here and see if we have any questions. Perfect. So I do have some questions that came in here. Thank you for submitting those. So first question I have here is, how long does it take to do the assessment? The assessment takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and it's online. So essentially candidates can do it anywhere from which they've got an internet connection. So they can do it on their computer, their smartphone, their tablet. And yeah, once they submit their responses, typically you will get results within moments, and you can access those via the portal. Okay, perfect. So next question I have is, how much does this service cost? So the service is really dependent on the size of your organization, and you can please get in touch with me and I can give you more insight into that. But essentially, as the volume of the size of the organization increases, the cost per assessment decreases. And so this is a great tool to use for, candidates, but also your existing workforce as well, specifically with our subscription pricing plan. Me hiring against the ideal profile. Okay, so we have a question here about whether hiring against the ideal profile to help balance a team out. So if I understand this question correctly, so if we're hiring to increase variety on a team, what does that mean with regards to potentially hiring people who fall outside of the ideal score range? So that's a great question. And what I can say to that is, depending on what the role is, certain dimensions and areas might be considered as more valuable and important to consider than others. So for instance, if we're looking at a role that requires a lot of attention to detail, where you're dealing with numbers and important documents and manuscripts, you might definitely want to be considering someone who is, say, higher in the attention to detail regimented side. There might be other dimensions where if the individual fell outside of range, it might not necessarily be a risk, and the interview questions in the reports can help you probe into that. So for the example I used, you definitely want to focus on the attention to detail, but maybe the fact that they're more of a reserved worker might be okay, because that's not necessarily negatively impacting their role and their responsibilities. The nature of their organization might also enable a lot of independent and task-focused work, so that could be an ideal fit, even if the person, say, fell outside of range in certain areas. The interview questions that are provided for that candidate and specific to that candidate can help you explore that area further to see if, okay, is this a concern or not? And so another question I have here is how to use the tool around safety. So that's a great question. So to use this tool around the safety focus, yes, there's definitely certain pieces that you would consider over others. So as you know, our AVP model does focus heavily on a safety component as well. Now, depending on what the role is, what the responsibilities are, and what the industry is, certain characteristics might be favorable over others. So I'll use the example of a scaffolder. What we saw with working with groups of scaffolders is that typically one of the ideal profiles of a scaffolder is, say, someone who's thrill-seeking but also cautious. Now, what that means is that the ideal scaffolder might be comfortable working in high-risk environments where there's naturally a certain level of unknowns because of the nature of their work. However, they're kind of smart and calculated about the level of risk that they're taking. And so the scaffolder who is thrill-seeking and cautious, they're actually what is considered to be a lower risk individual. And that same kind of philosophy might apply to other roles as well, like firefighters, paramedics, and first responders. However, the same might not be applicable to different types of safety sensitive roles. So say that might be a risk for a driver, or it might be a risk for a welder. So we've actually got a library of specific benchmarks which speak to the ideal score ranges for different roles and different profiles. I hope this helps answer your question. That was a great one, by the way. Okay. Another question I have here is, how do you make sure the answers are honest and the results are a true reflection of your personality? That's a great question. So what we say, and this is embedded in our instructions as well, is we say this tool is to help you better understand work style. So and I think this question was more of a safety sensitive focus. So typically when we're getting the industrial workers to take the assessment, or this might even apply to other types of workers as well, we say, you know what, we give you guys hard hats to protect you against falling objects. We give you glasses to protect you against debris. This is another tool to help you create more self-awareness within yourself and your own personal risks when it comes to safety. We've all got safety risks at the end of the day, no matter what our role is and no matter what environment we work within. So here's another tool to put in your toolbox to make sure that you're safe in the workday, but also when you're doing work around the house or driving on the road. Again, there's no right or wrong or good personality. We're just helping with making the ideal fit placement. So placing people into the roles, environments, and teams that naturally complement their strengths. There's no focus on having the good or bad or the right or wrong here. It's just all about ensuring fit. And when there's the proper fit at the get-go, it's just a better process for everyone, for both the candidate and the hiring manager, because people naturally want to be working within environments that are going to support their strengths. And if we can make that placement, it just avoids headache for both the candidate and the employer as well. Okay, and another question I got here is, does the candidate get their results? So that's really depending on the organization. So we do have a report that's called the participant report, and that's all about giving the individual more self-awareness into their own personal strengths and also giving them insight into their risks and potential areas for development. So it's a great self-insight tool as well. So a lot of managers like to give this to the employee during onboarding to help set them up for success. If as an employer you want the candidate to get their results automatically upon completion, we can definitely set that up for you as well. And yeah, that's no problem. But the option and the is really yours. So whether you want the participant to get their results automatically, or you prefer to hold off and distribute that during onboarding, that is definitely customizable to your preferences. Another question I have before we wrap up here is, what languages do you offer the assessment in? So we offer the assessment in a variety of different languages. Right now we have 20, and every single month we're adding more and more languages to our library. So we've got the assessment in French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, Punjabi, and a variety of others. You can definitely see a list of the languages that we offer on our website at talentclick.com. And you can also feel free to be in touch with me directly by email or phone, and I can address any further questions you guys have. Again, thank you so much for your attendance and participation today. Really appreciated. A copy of this session will be sent to you by email. So whoever registered for the webinar and whoever is in attendance today, you will get a copy of this. Again, thanks everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.